Okay, here we go. So before I get started, I do want to talk a little bit about the work that we do at Heads Up at Loyola Marymount. This is an NIAAA, let me come over here, an NIAAA funded study. So we're all sitting with our fingers crossed today that Congress is going to pass a budget that doesn't significantly cut down the NIAAA or the NIH. But basically, we conduct research and design interventions that are based on social norms theory. Can I get a quick show of hands? How many people are familiar with social norms-based alcohol interventions? Okay, so a lot of you guys are. So I'm not going to go into them too much. But social norms interventions, the basic idea is that college students tend to overestimate how much peers are engaging in problem behaviors, for example, binge drinking. If you think about the college campus environment, being drunk, drunkenness, parties, these things are all very public, observable behaviors, and they tend to get a lot more, people talk about them a lot. Everybody's talking about who got wasted over the weekend, who hooked up with who, that's just how it is. You're gonna hear much less conversation about more private, boring behaviors like studying, working out, volunteering, etc. So this is a problem because in social norms theory, the basic idea is that, look, you overestimate these problem behaviors, everybody does it, and it's just because of the nature of the problem behaviors. They're more scandalous, right? So social norms-based interventions basically seek to correct these norms. And we've done this two ways in the past. One is through the social norms and marketing campaigns. These were done like in the early 2000s. They're really not that popular anymore. This is a poster currently hanging in my office from like 2003. But basically it's just kind of trying to shove down students' throat the idea that no one else is drinking as much as they are and that they're overestimating these norms. So you can see the person in black over there is the only person at the party who had more than 10 drinks. What we found, and especially in more recent years, is students aren't paying attention to these posters on campus. They're just ignoring them because everybody's on their smartphones these days. So the next thing, personalized normative feedback, and this is the NIAAA's like go-to strategy, and all of the alcohol interventions on college campuses typically have a personalized normative feedback component. So like college students in here, typically when you were a first-year student before you arrived on campus, you had to do a mandatory kind of alcohol education training program. That program, whether it be like alcohol, EDU, basics, all the big commercial programs contain at least a little bit of this. And it's been found in studies to be the most effective part of those alcohol education programs. Because as a young person, you do care about what other peers are doing, and your perception of peer behaviors are the #1 predictor of your own behavior. So basically, this is the idea where we give students, basically you answer a bunch of questions about your own alcohol use behaviors and how much you think your peers are drinking. The survey usually takes like between 10 and 20 minutes. Then at the end, the computer program spits back out this feedback that is based typically, and this is what I think is the problem with these interventions, and you can see it's really small, but it says note at the bottom, this information comes from a random sample of 2,548 University of Houston students. So the problem that we found with these interventions is that heavy drinking students are just like, well, only nerds took that survey. They don't believe the statistics, and they think it's stupid, right? There's also like a lot of text. It also just doesn't look very cool. And one of the things that I started to think about with social media is that, you know what, social media could really be playing a role in making students less likely to believe these statistics. So really, social media, what students see on social media, whether they see alcohol-related content, et cetera, posted by peers, this could really undermine the effectiveness of these intervention programs. So I started looking into this literature because our lab is really tasked with trying to make these interventions, trying to optimize these interventions and make them more effective. So I started looking in the literature, and this was like in 2015 is when I really started to get into social media stuff. And what I found is that all the research was focused on Facebook. So all the research is old. I guess one thing to note here is when you're publishing, you conduct a study, it gets peer reviewed, you write up the results, they get peer reviewed. But the earliest a paper is going to get published is 6 months after it was submitted for publication, which is probably another 6 months after the study was conducted, right? So there's this kind of delay in the social media research, which is a big problem with how fast social media is evolving. So in 2015, which is crazy, all the research is focused on Facebook. College students use Facebook a lot. There's a disproportionate amount of alcohol content posted. Underage drinking and college drinking are glorified. Portraying oneself as a big drinker is an important and socially desirable component of social media identity. These things all seem super obvious, right? Like we didn't need these studies to show us these things. And in working in our lab, we have myself, my boss, Joe Labrie, and a couple recent graduates who are research coordinators, and then we have a bunch of undergraduate research assistants. And the undergraduate research assistants are really tasked with helping us get through the literature, summarizing articles, flagging ones they think that are really important for us to read, et cetera. And our research assistants are coming back to me and being like, this literature sucks. Sarah, we need to do something. We need to study Instagram and Snapchat because that's what everybody here is using. No one's posting alcohol stuff on Facebook. Maybe they did back in 2008, but nobody's doing that now. So we started to talk about Instagram and Snapchat. We could find nothing in the literature about alcohol-related content and substance use as of 2015 on Instagram or Snapchat. The other thing is that I couldn't really find anything on Facebook that addressed the question I was really interested in, which was whether exposure to alcohol on social media affects your perception of peer norms and then affects your drinking behavior. Because if it doesn't, we don't need to be worried about this, but I have a hunch that it does. And what was in the literature was kind of a lot of fear-mongering about this, but not actually much data, right? Based on the idea that we know from years of research and social learning theory that exposure to alcohol use in traditional media, like for example, TV shows and movies, predicts later drinking among adolescents. And I guess researchers are thinking because Facebook has actual peers, it's kind of like a super peer and it might be even more influential than traditional media. The only study I could find was published in 2013 in kind of a crappy journal, like not the journals we typically submit to, and the method was not so great. But basically, these researchers just created a bunch of fake student Facebook profiles. In some of the profiles, they put a lot of alcohol content. So it looked like these students were drinking all the time and posting about it on social media. And then the control profiles just didn't have alcohol, but they were also fake. Then they had undergrads view these profiles, and then they asked them about their perceived norms for drinking at the university. And what they found was the students who were randomized to see the profiles with the more alcohol-related content perceived that students at the university drank more. So I wanted to build on this and kind of test this idea. And taking our research assistants' kind of tips in line, trying to push this forward and evolve this literature to focus on other platforms beyond Facebook, we started to look at Instagram and Snapchat. And I did check. I didn't know if LMU kids are all about Snapchat and Instagram, but nationally it looks like these are the two most popular ones. And this is the only data I could find that was actually from this spring, 2017. And as you can see, since 2015, when I first started looking at the literature, Snapchat has grown in popularity hardcore. And so is Instagram. Twitter, not so much. Twitter's going downhill. and nobody really cares about Facebook. So I felt like, okay, we definitely have some research questions that we can answer here. So I'm not sure, I know there's a lot of young people here, but I don't know how many of you adults have actually tried to go on Instagram and Snapchat. Instagram's like fairly simple, simple interface. When I went on Snapchat, my research assistants were like, you need to download Snapchat. So I was like, okay, here's my phone, put it on there for me. I couldn't even figure out how to do anything. It's very complicated. There's no like menu. Everything's like swiping. It's very just like difficult to figure out, right? And I'm not that old, so what we started to think about was, look, Snapchat and Instagram are both these image-based platforms, but they have very different features. And when they first started out, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, now Facebook's now stealing the features of every platform, and they also bought Instagram, but it seems that the features for when something really first came out depends how people use it, is what I've found. So in this case, we wanted to look at if there were qualitative differences in the types of alcohol-related posts on Snapchat and Instagram. And we came up with a really easy way to do this. And this was the paper that I was invited here to talk about today. It's actually the simplest study we've ever done, I think, in our lab. So in this study, we just had two really simple predictions. And young people in the room, you're gonna be like, these predictions are so obvious, right? Instagram, we thought that this would be the most likely destination for photos that glamorize underage drinking. And this is due to the increased privacy and fewer adults relative to Facebook. And these attractive photo filters, which are kind of like the central feature of Instagram. And then also the app just kind of has this emphasis on documenting kind of your best, most beautiful moments and kind of like your ideal self, right? In contrast, we thought Snapchat would be where we would find posts about negative consequences, getting wasted, passing out, throwing up, stuff like that. So consequential alcohol posts. And for those of you who have not tried to go on Snapchat before, here's like a little diagram of the different screens that look super confusing. But we thought, this is going to be where we find these embarrassing posts, and this is due to the increased privacy and fewer adults. You don't use your real name, you use like a handle. And back when we did this study, the only way that you could find someone on Snapchat was if you already had their phone number, right? So there were fewer followers. You don't follow as many people on Snapchat as you do on Instagram or Facebook, just because it's kind of consuming. Like, people snap throughout their day. We know, like, the college students that work in our lab are snapping just like mundane things that, like, you're reading an article, you're gonna snap it and say something funny about it. It's like kind of trying to be witty and documenting everything. It's kind of the most like your real self or your actual self. And snap, so you snap, and whatever you snap is added to your story, which your story is an ongoing film of everything that you've done in the past 24 hours, every snap that you've taken, but this disappears forever after 24 hours. So clearly it seems like if something bad happened or something embarrassing happened and you want to post about it, show your close friends, it's going to go on Snapchat. So we came up with this interesting method in order to just take a look at this. We had our research assistants were like super instrumental in helping us with coming up with this study design, but we actually asked them to develop 6 vignettes and 6 photo examples of social media posts that glamorize heavy drinking, glamorize alcohol use, and also 6 that depict negative consequences associated with college drinking. And we created this social media quiz where we simply displayed each vignette in photo stimulus followed by a paired comparisons. This paired comparison method, we don't really see this in the addiction literature, the alcohol use literature, but it used to be something that we did in social psychology a lot. But basically, and I think they actually still do it in marketing studies a lot too. We basically showed the photo or the vignette, and then we had students choose, okay, which would you be more likely to see this on? And we presented each possible pairwise comparison, and we also counterbalanced them, so there wasn't anything funky going on there. They just chose the most likely platform from each pair. And we had 196 students take the social media quiz within like 1 week. All of them, well, a criteria for participating was that you needed to have Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat in order to be making these judgments, right? Most kids at our school have all three, so I think like our real sample size was only like 211. We had 211 kids try to participate, and then a couple of them were excluded because they didn't have all three. But most of them are freshmen and sophomores, and their mean age was 19 years old. So now we're going to take a look at some of the vignettes and the photos that the kids came up with. Okay, so this is our glamorous example vignette, and there were 6 of these. But we had a large group of, I'm going to read it out loud. A large group of frat guys lived together in a big house known to be one of the best party spots near campus, complete with a fully stocked bar and 3 beer pong tables. This evening, the house is cleaned and the guys have begun to pregame before a big party they're having later. One of the guys calls everyone over for a group photo of the housemates to document that their house is clean and that the guys are looking their best. They all grin, huddled together in front of their fully stocked bar, knowing they're the best looking and most fun guys on campus. Would you be more likely, so this is a screenshot of the actual survey, this is exactly what it looked like, but you only saw one pairwise comparison at a time, so these bottom 2 didn't show up until you answered the previous one. So they first chose between Facebook and Instagram, then they chose between Instagram and Snapchat, then Snapchat or Facebook. Here's our negative consequence example. A group of guys are belligerently drunk at a rugby party. One of the party hosts records a video that first shows the guys pounding shots, and then one of the guys getting decked in the face as a fight breaks out. Which social media account do you think the host is most likely to post this video on? So same situation, they're just making these choices. Here's the example of photos. We did something cool here. The one of the guys in our lab is really good with Photoshop. So we basically had students find us example posts of their friends, and then we didn't want to actually use the photos of their friends because what if other students recognize them? So we just found others, we just went on Google Images and tried to find very similar photos. Here are 2 examples. We then, Andy, my colleague, photoshopped these so they fit the exact specifications of what that post would look like on Instagram, Snapchat, and Facebook. And we kept everything consistent in terms of like the captions, which are done differently on the different platforms, what they said. Everything was super tight and clean in terms of making these comparisons. The first one that's glamorous is like obviously a spring break group photo, and then the consequential one is this kid puking. So for analysis, we did these generalized Bradley-Terry models to test these pairwise platform comparisons. And throughout this presentation, I'm gonna go a little bit light on the statistics because it's kind of boring. But if you guys have questions about that, we can come back to these statistics. I am the one who did the statistics for all these studies, so I can talk about them a lot if you guys want to. But so basically, this Bradley-Terry model is not very commonly used, but they basically examine the probabilities that participants selected either Facebook, Instagram, or Snapchat as the most likely destination for a given post when it was pitted against the other 2 platforms. And what we found was that both of our hypotheses were supported, and the data was like almost perfect. So these are the different, here's a quick data table. If you just look over to the probabilities of winning, that's kind of where you can tell that for glamorized alcohol-related posts, Facebook didn't win very much, and Instagram won most of the time. For consequential alcohol-related posts, I mean, this is like, data is almost perfect, where the probability of Snapchat winning is almost 1 across all these posts. So what we found here was that, exposure to alcohol-related posts by peers on Instagram could normalize and glamorize underage drinking more so than Facebook, so maybe we should be focusing on Instagram. And then also that on Snapchat, exposure to these consequential alcohol-related posts may normalize binge drinking and negative consequences much more so than Facebook, so maybe we should be focusing on Snapchat. But should we forget all about Facebook? And this is where things get a little bit complicated. I would say, hold up, not so fast. So we haven't looked at exposure between alcohol-related posts on each platform as it relates to students' future drinking or norms. We also haven't considered the potential role of network size and the amount of overlap with offline friends. And we also have not considered the costs, and by costs I mean like difficulty, money, etc., associated with reaching young people on each platform. And this is like a big factor here to consider. So then we did this second study in order to at least try to look at alcohol exposure as it relates to later drinking, and then also see how it affects drinking perceptions of drinking norms, beliefs about the role of alcohol in college, and drinking motives. And the one thing that we thought from like the broader developmental literature is that the first 6 weeks of college, when you first get to college and you're in this kind of transitional state, you might be way more likely to kind of be checking others out on social media and trying to figure out what's cool from what you see on social media. So this kind of informed the design of this study. I'm gonna skip ahead really quick. So we had 408 first-year students completed online surveys 1 month and 6 months into college. And the NIAAA also considers the first 6 weeks of college to be this critical time period. And this is why we usually do interventions and try to prevent college student drinking when students first arrive on campus. Because what we found is that the drinking patterns that you establish during the first 6 weeks of college actually determine your alcohol trajectories for the rest of your college career. So going back, these were our research questions. The second 2 research questions are a little bit beyond the scope of this talk, but we'll look at that a little bit. But what I really want to look at with you guys is the question number 1, which is between Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat, which of these do college students use most frequently, which one has the most alcohol-related content, and which best predicts future drinking? So the measures, we had a bunch of measures in this study. Past month frequency of checking social media and number of connections. These are the questions we asked. How often have you checked Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat? How many friends do you have on Facebook? How many people do you follow on Instagram and Snapchat? Past month frequency of seeing alcohol-related content on social media. We just had students self-report this. So when you have checked Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat, how often have you seen alcohol-related posts from friends or people that you follow? And this was measured, this was just like a 4-point scale from never to always. And then what we did was multiply these together and add them up, which I reason that, exposure to, if you're a user of all 3 platforms, which most of the kids in this study are, you really can't think of any one of these being exposure in a vacuum, right? It's also going to maybe be difficult to self-report what you saw in each one, so we just thought, for this main analysis, let's just create one index. So that's what we did. We basically just multiplied these together for each platform and then added them up. We also controlled for past month alcohol use of close college friends. And this is an issue that wasn't in the literature at all, but I think is very important. And it's this idea that I don't think all alcohol-related content on social media is equally influential. What you see, if you're a heavy drinker, you're drinking and you see your close friends drinking in real life, right? So this exposure, any reflection of that on social media is already going to predict your future drinking because you saw it in person. So it's kind of overlapping with real life, whereas there's this other kind of unique component of exposure that I think is more interesting, and that's if you are not so of a heavy drinking student and most of your friends don't drink, the fact that you might see extended network peers that are maybe just your acquaintances or classmates that you randomly follow on Instagram or a friend on Facebook, that might be more influential, right? Because it's something you wouldn't see if social media wasn't a thing. So that was something we wanted to control for. Then we also measured weekly drinks at time 1 and time 2. These other 3 things that we measured are mediators. So we wanted to look at like, what are the mechanisms by which seeing alcohol on social media predicts your later alcohol use? And these measures are like really common in the literature. I'm not going to talk about them very much, but just perceived drinking norms, beliefs about the role of alcohol in the college experience, and then enhancement drinking motives, which are like reasons to drink. And the enhancement subscale for drinking motives are just like you're drinking to feel better or be better. So this was our theorized model. Like we said, every path controlled for students' own drinks per week and close friends drinking at time 1. And this is the model this is very, very complicated. This is a moderated multiple mediation model. And the moderated part is by student sex. So what we found was that this predictive relationship held for everyone, but it was especially strong among male students. It was a little bit stronger among male students than female students. And also norms were stronger as a mediator among male students. But what I really want to talk about is just the descriptive stats that kind of get lost in the larger paper that talks all about the gender differences and everything, is just these differences in the number of connections students reported. So on Facebook, the average number of friends was 597. On Instagram, on average, they followed 293 people, and on Snapchat, they followed 64 people. So what you see here is this idea that like your Facebook is where you're following extended network peers that are acquaintances, and a lot of them you don't see in real life. Instagram's kind of in the middle, and then Snapchat, you're not really following people that you're not already close with. And if you think about getting to college, when you arrive at college, it's most common and normative to like Facebook friend someone in your class. You're not gonna like try to search them out unless you're like a stalker, or try to follow them on Instagram or Snapchat right away. It's just like not something that you do. So this has implications in terms of which platform we want to target. Okay, here's some more statistics. So this is just, the main paper focused on kind of this total alcohol exposure across the 3 platforms, but for our discussion today, it's kind of interesting to look at them broken down. So Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat individually. We see here that Snapchat, the mean and standard deviation, so the mean is higher in terms of how often they check Snapchat and the frequency of them seeing others' alcohol-related posts. Facebook and Instagram are pretty similar on both of those measures. So from this data alone, it looks like, well, maybe we should be focusing on Snapchat. However, this is where it gets complicated. This correlation table is broken down by sex. So we have boys on the far right and then girls on the left. But T1 alcohol exposure on Instagram and Snapchat were more strongly related to students drinking at time 2 than was their Facebook alcohol exposure. So this kind of fits with the first paper I talked about. We're like, hey, maybe we should be paying attention to these. But exposure to alcohol on Instagram and Snapchat were also more strongly related to participants' own drinking and the drinking of their close friends at time 1. So basically what this is saying is because you follow or you're connected to less people on Instagram and Snapchat, it's really reflecting your offline life, right? So it's reflecting your own drinking at that time and the close drinking of your friends at that time. So maybe it's not so, to me, that makes it seem like, you know what, maybe we don't need to pay attention to Snapchat and Instagram as much. Since exposure to alcohol on Facebook has less to do with drinking that's already occurring in students' close friend group, and more to do with extended network peers that you don't see every day in real life, this might be an important thing to target. And one big limitation is all this was self-report measures. So we have no idea, and the whole social media literature to date is all self-report measures. So we really have no idea how accurate students are in ascertaining how much time they are spending on social media, or how much alcohol they're seeing. It's like, if you think about answering those questions yourself, like I think I would probably underestimate the time I spend on social media. Maybe I would also underestimate how much alcohol I'm seeing, I'm not sure. But so from this study, we wrote a grant to NIAAA where we are partnering with all these tech startups, right? And the idea here is to let's objectively measure all these things so we can get to the bottom of this. And this grant we wrote last year at some point, and it was a little bit wild in terms of like the grants we usually submit, because we had never worked with any of these startups before. We had letters of support from all of them, but it was a little bit, it seemed like we were really proposing something that seemed a little bit crazy. And the grant actually got a perfect score, and now we're launching this study in July. And unfortunately, this is like we're all working on all this stuff right now, trying to hustle to get this ready for July. But basically, this study will objectively assess students' social media use and exposure to alcohol-related content on Facebook and Instagram during their first year of college. We're creating this custom web portal. I just had to email our developer actually this morning. But this web portal, they're going to sign in, they're going to log in with their Facebook credentials and their Instagram credentials to allow it to take Snapchats of their actual Facebook and Instagram news feeds at these random times, right? And then we're going to take those Snapchats of those news feeds and we're going to send them to this other company called Ditto Labs. Ditto Labs is a marketing research company that's new, and they've created this machine learning algorithm that will code like millions of social media posts for certain visual content. So in our case, they're going to code all their feeds for alcohol-related content. Then we're also using this other app called Rescue Time, which is this time management company. So it's like students use this, workers use this. It's kind of keeps track for your own sake of how much time you're spending on social media. It's an app that goes on your smartphone and your computer, and you can check in and see how much time you've actually spent on like every individual website and app that you use. And Rescue Time is working with us, so the students will be able to see their data, but we'll also be able to see only their Facebook and Instagram data. And Snapchat, we're not studying Snapchat in this study because the posts disappear, so like clearly we can't study it. Snapchat has a lot of caveats that make it really difficult to study the content and how it affects what users see. Okay, so for now, on which platform should we focus our prevention efforts? This really depends on who you want to reach. Young people who have not started drinking yet are more likely to be on Facebook than Instagram or Snapchat. Heavy drinkers are more likely to be found on Snapchat, but they're much more easily reached through Facebook and Instagram. And this is another problem with Snapchat, which I'll talk about in a minute. How much money do you have to reach the people you're trying to reach? It's really cheap on Facebook and Instagram to promote a message or do a paid advertisement and reach, for example, a very targeted audience like everybody in San Diego County who's between 13 and 17 years old. You can do that super easily for not much money. On Snapchat, though, you can't do anything like that. And although there are brands on Snapchat, those brands are paying like hundreds of thousands of dollars to be on Snapchat. And there's no, in terms of like nonprofits, there's no possible way we're ever gonna have enough money to actually pay to reach students on there. Also on Snapchat, students don't just follow random things. Like there's not adult accounts or nonprofit accounts that students follow. That just is, it's just like not a norm on there. So there's also no possibilities for organic reach. Or in an organic reach, like on Facebook, if you promote a story and one of your friends likes it, you see it even though we did not pay for it to be in your news feed. And there's not anything like that on Snapchat. So this is what, and this is something that I'm kind of been obsessed with during the past year, is okay, given the data that we've collected, what can we do? So here are some tips for social media-based prevention. Avoid psychological reactance. Now, psychological reactance is this thing that happens when we try to give someone prevention information and they don't want it, or it makes them uncomfortable. So fear, messages that kind of trigger fear, like fear arousal things, we know trigger psychological reactance. But we've also found that like even trying to get kids that are heavy drinkers to answer questions about alcohol, even though we're not telling them not to drink, it triggers this thing called psychological reactance, where it feels like they assume we want them to drink less, that's why we're asking, and they totally just check out and are not interested, right? And on social media, younger people feel like that's their space. So what we found is that kids on social media are especially likely to experience psychological reactance if we're hammering them with these prevention messages all the time. So my advice is to not hammer them with prevention messages all the time and try to be a little bit more creative. Make sure your brand seems hip and cool. Rescue Social Change that's down here in San Diego, they do an excellent job of this. Their whole thing is creating these brands that then deliver the prevention content, and it feels like an in-group, right? So they're really hip and cool, and they do the best job of anybody in terms of that. But so what I would suggest that we think about doing, and we try to think outside of the box, and we try to consider delivering interventions or embedding prevention info within the type of things that the kids are already doing on social media anyways. So for example, watching viral videos, joining photo challenges, taking quizzes, and playing games. These are things that people do on Facebook. The last thing I want to tell you about today is like my baby passion project, and this is something that I have not been allowed to talk about until like last week, because we've been trying to get funding to make this happen. And it looks like we're finally moving forward. So here we've kind of created this Facebook connected game called Campus Gander. And Campus Gander, the whole idea here is that we're delivering alcohol personalized normative feedback within a Facebook game that is for testing perceptions of college life. And it's branded so it looks cool and fun. And we try to make it especially attractive to like first-year students when they would be, first-year students, they go on social media and we know that they're really information seeking. They're trying to find out what's cool at their school, what other kids are doing, right? Like they want to find out, they're seeking information. So we thought, okay, we'll take advantage of that and just make something that automates that process for them. So we created this whole thing called Gander, Gamified Alcohol Norm Discovery and Readjustment. So we talked about earlier, web-based PNF interventions, these little components that are in like Alcohol EDU and all these really popular commercial programs. We found that they are the most popular strategy, but they also have limitations that if we think outside of the box, maybe we can fix those limitations. We know they're less effective among heavy drinkers due to inattention, distrust of the normative statistics, due in part probably to what they're seeing on social media. And also that the alcohol focus, the simple alcohol focus of something called alcohol EDU is going to trigger reactance. Just asking kids questions and providing feedback, even that the feedback is designed, it doesn't say anything threatening. The feedback that they receive in a standard PNF intervention is very just like, hey, this is what you thought everybody else was doing, this is what they're really doing. It in no way says you should drink less, right? But kids still feel like that's what we want them to do. So this is Campus Gander. Campus Gander has 3 key features that I'm going to talk about a little bit. Campus Gander uses Facebook heavily, and this is going to be something that's in the Facebook App Store that you can sign into using your Facebook account. We're in the process of creating, so we're working with the I don't know how many of you have heard of the app called RadPad, but we're working with the developers that created that app to create this app. And we've also already tested 2 versions of this, and these are the screenshots I'm going to show you today. This is all done in Qualtrics, which is our university survey software. What we figured out with Qualtrics is like, if you know a little bit of JavaScript, you can actually kind of make it look like it's an app when it's really just a bunch of surveys put together. And oddly, we found out that Qualtrics has Facebook login, which doesn't even make any sense, but you can actually have survey participants sign in with Facebook, which makes it seem kind of like it's an app, right? So in Campus Gander, we advertise this to students on Facebook and Instagram, just like you see other games and online apps and stuff like that advertised in news feeds. Clicking on an ad takes the student to a landing page where they log in with their Facebook account to play. The game then uses their Facebook profile photo and it has them select their university. Then an animated loading screen shows users the Facebook profile photos of the other students who are playing at their school. So these are animated, so they kind of like cascade across the screen. And the students are told they'll be guessing and betting on the behaviors of these students, and they can earn more points by having more accurate guesses. And right before, so you see the photos of the other students at your university before, and then you also see them after you answer the questions and place your bets, right before we give you the feedback, right? So it's like 427 students were playing at LMU, here's how they responded. And this idea of co-presence is from the gamification literature, and it's just the idea of that a major kind of component of online games is the feeling of being connected with others online and having some sort of visual representation of yourself and other people, right? Like through avatars or photos. And a lot of apps use Facebook for this. Okay, now here's the kicker in this app. The illusion of chance is really big, and the illusion of chance we use to try to get rid of the psychological reactants. So basically the idea here is like, this has nothing to do with alcohol. For you, because the spinners landed on this, this is about alcohol for you. This is a really simple thing, but at the beginning you see the students with other people playing, and then we had 2 versions of this. In Campus Gander version 1, we had these 15 different aspects of college life looked like they could be selected by this animated spinner. And you can't really tell here, but the spinner's like super convincing, and it looks just like a slot machine. But eventually it lands on these 3 topics. It seems random, right? Like if I'm a heavy drinker, I'm not threatened by this. Later, after you answer the questions, basically you're answering the typical standard PNF questions about, how much your peers do these behaviors, and then you're also reporting your own behaviors. After you do that, another spinner selects one of those topics for you to receive feedback. So we're basically like tricking people here. It seems like this is a game, but really we're gonna give you alcohol feedback. We're just gonna do this in a very sly way. In version 2, we let students submit their own questions. In version 2 is a little bit different. Version 2, we basically ran for like 6 weeks, I think, at LMU this fall. And we had students submit their own questions to be gandered each week. And this was kind of fun because they submit like funny and witty questions. But 25% of all the questions submitted in the game were about alcohol and partying anyways. And what this tells us is like, this is something kids are interested in. They are actually interested in how much other kids are drinking. So it's great. And we can actually ask about these things using their own words instead of our kind of formal alcohol survey words. But so in this same thing, they answered both questions, and in version 2, they got feedback on one of the questions they answered selected, which seemed like it was selected by chance, so it also had a spinner.
So Sarah, were you surprised that 1 in 4 actually?
Yeah, well, I kind of thought it would be maybe be like 1 in 6, or it seemed like a lot, but I do feel like drinking is a huge activity at our school, so maybe we shouldn't have been that surprised. The next thing was a system of points, and in version 1, we had users start out with 250 points. And also, in version 1, there was no prizes. So it was just like you were playing like other games on Facebook where it's not like you're gonna win money or anything, we're just playing because whatever, people like points. In version 2, we actually had like hardcore prizes. And my boss, Joe Labrie, one of the great things about working at LMU is that my boss was chief of staff for the university. So he just like will dictate this is how it's gonna be, and everybody at university is just like, oh, okay, sounds good. Like he made it so the winner of Campus Gander in the fall got the top pick for their dorm selection. So the kids were like all about this. And then he also like got money from somewhere. So we didn't have any money to create this app, but he somehow came up with like prizes we could have. We also had $250 cash prizes for like the second and third place runner-ups. But in version 1, there was no prizes. It was just like, well, let's just see like maybe points do something for intrinsic motivation if there's no prizes. So in version 1, we had bets. And I really like the betting thing. After submitting your perceptions of what you think other students are doing, and you also reported your own behavior, then we asked you to place a bet on your perception, right? And this was cool because in PNF interventions, a lot of times we look at how confident you are. So I ask you questions about like, oh, how confident are you about that answer? This is like a real behavioral measure of that. And of course, the betting here is designed to increase attention and just like kind of make it more fun. In version 2, we had to get rid of the betting. Not because it wasn't effective, but just because we're trying to write an R01 for this for June. And the person who we're writing an R01 with is like a college gambling researcher. So we thought like, oh, he's not gonna be all about the betting, but we really needed him to be on our grant. So we dropped the whole betting thing, and instead we came up with this concept called GAN dollars. And in version 2, you could earn GAN dollars for submitted questions, voting on questions, and inviting your friends. So it was like you earn GAN dollars for having accurate perceptions. All the questions were worth 50 points, but then you could also like get more GAN dollars by doing more things. And importantly, the point-based reward systems were incorporated into the feedback that the users received. Okay. So if we think about what that first feedback looked like in a standard PNF intervention that had those charts and then all that text, basically we've gotten rid of all that text because it's lame, and the charts are the main components here, and this is what we've retained. So prior to this, you get to see all the people who answered the question. And this is important because instead of the statistics we're spitting back to you being from some lame survey that some nerdy kids presumably took last year, this is the people who you saw the Facebook profile pictures of answered these questions also in the past couple of days. So it's much more, it's designed to make those norms very, very kind of transparent. What's going on here is very much more transparent. So this question, how many drinks did the typical female freshman have over the weekend? Kayla, who's one of our research assistants, guessed 7. The real answer was 2, so she only got 2 GAN dollars. And then how she compares. We thought it'd be cool to put like the profile picture in there instead of being like your behavior or whatever. And then LMU girls, clearly she's drinking way more than everybody else. The other important thing with the PNF is that presenting it this way, we didn't present it like we wanted to reduce your drinking. We presented it like, hey, look, here's some feedback that we're gonna give you kind of as a gift to help you score better next time you play, or for your self-knowledge. So we presented it like that, which had not been done in the literature before. Then we did a focus group survey. Also, little caveat here, we acted like we had nothing. The other thing that's great about working at LMU is LMU's IRB is totally fine with deception. which is crazy to me. Coming from my graduate program, like our IRB is crazy. LMU is just like, oh yeah, sounds good, like whatever. But so we told the kids that Campus Gander was being tested at LMU and that we were by this startup company in Playa Vista. Playa Vista is like right next to LMU, and it's like basically there's all these new tech startups there. So we're like, oh, that sounds convincing. So we said we're this startup called Gander Labs, and we're testing this app. LMU was the first university it was going to be at. And we asked students, what did you like best about this app? And these are the things that they said. Getting real statistics about other students that are relevant about college life. It tells you the opinions of other students, seeing how I compare to others. Seeing how do I compare to others is super interesting because we know that's something that everybody uses social media for. That's like a big motivation of using social media. And then gaining understanding of the social dynamics on my campus. What did you like the least? The user interface, it was lagging. I wish it had been ongoing and lasted the whole year. It glitches too much. I wish it was an actual app. So clearly we've used this to convince our boss to try to get funding for an actual app for this. And okay, so kids liked it, but was it effective? And what we found, and this is the paper that's published and why I can finally talk about this, is we just published a paper in addictive behaviors based on our version 1, which is actually the version that had no prizes and visually looked way lamer than version 2. But compared to the standard alcohol PNF delivered by a boring alcohol-focused online survey that asked the exact same questions and used the exact same normative statistics in the feedback, we found that Campus Gander better reduced perceptions of drinking norms and alcohol use 2 weeks later, and it was a pretty big effect. These charts on the other side are for a paper that I'm working on and we haven't published yet, which is also from version 1. And before version 1, we had students who did Campus Gander version 1 also did a survey that they didn't know was related to Campus Gander. And in this survey, we took like a bunch of personality measures. And one of the things that we measured was how much they use Facebook for information seeking, right? And what we found here was that Campus Gander killed regular PNF among heavy drinking students who used Facebook for information seeking. So students who were higher in that, Campus Gander was even more effective. Campus Gander version 2 results, like it hasn't been that long since we finished that study, but we also we have good results from that too. That we didn't test against standard PNF, that the spinner either span on a control topic or alcohol. So we're now analyzing results for those new studies where we have like 3 new papers in the works. So this is something we're super excited about, and I wanted to talk about this today because it just kind of gives an idea of where I think prevention efforts and intervention efforts that incorporate social media, this is the direction we need to go, where we're thinking outside the box and thinking about how we can leverage the popularity of these platforms in order to actually improve our existing prevention and intervention strategies. Now, I know I was like sped through all this, but I do want to leave some time to take questions, and if anybody has questions or when they want to talk about any of the studies, we can go back. Also, with all the young people in the room, I'm interested in if anybody has comments or more questions about Campus Gander. And here's my email address in case anybody has comments or ideas moving forward. I'd love to hear from you. All right.
I'm gonna let you get a drink of water.
Thank you.